Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Legends of Sport podcast. I'm Andy Bernstein, your host. Happy to be bringing another episode in our Legendary Photographer series. Our guest today is Lucy Nicholson, a good friend of mine, an incredible photojournalist, somebody I spent years and years and years sitting next to at Laker games. And Lucy is amazing. She is a Pulitzer Prize winner, part of a Reuters team that covered the migration story in 2019. Her work has been seen all around the world. We were actually in an exhibition and a book together called Who Shot Sports, which was curated by the great Gail Buckland. And so happy to have Lucy on the show today. Lucy came from the UK. She found her own path a little bit later than most in photography, I think in her early 20s, she said, and made her way via Mexico and South America, ended up in Los Angeles, and that's where our paths crossed. And I don't see her as much as I used to. She is covering more news these days. She is multifunctional and multimedia. She does a lot of video. She's been covering the pandemic. She's been covering all the George Floyd protests, and a lot to talk about with Lucy today. Had a great conversation with her. I hope you guys enjoy it. I did too. And as always, I will see you on the backside. Well, welcome everybody back to the Legends of Sport podcast. And I have my good friend, my colleague, Lucy Nicholson over here. How are you, Lucy?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Andy. It's awesome to be with you here.
It's so great to be sitting here with you, although, you know, we're doing Zoom, but usually we're sitting next to each other on a basketball court, which we've
Yes.
done for like 900 years. But
Yes.
we'll get into that. We'll get into that. So what have you been doing, Lucy, for, during the pandemic? I know that you've transitioned over to doing more news, and you're doing video and stuff, but what have you been up to these days?
Well, the pandemic obviously was a challenge for all of us. It was a challenge for me because I do still shoot some sports, but I also do news. So I was having to tell the story of the pandemic, which was a huge challenge. And one thing, I was very fortunate that I taught myself, I got an FAA license to be a drone pilot.
Wow.
And I was finding it challenging to find opportunities to use the drone because you can't fly over people, the FAA says. So it's really just sort of environmental shots. But when the pandemic started, I realized it was an awesome opportunity to show when everybody first stayed at home in LA. There
Yeah.
were so many crazy empty scenes. I would go out and freeways were empty, beaches were empty, and so I was able to fly my drone safely and without people, and I was shooting video for Reuters video as well.
Wow.
So that was a super fun experience. And
Mhm.
then I was also trying to the hardest thing in the US has been getting access to hospitals
Mm.
because of HIPAA. So we were working on that, and I did a couple of visits to an ICU, which was super challenging because Reuters is super conscious about safety. So I had to wear, the full-on Michelin suit,
Unbelievable.
goggles, and 95.
Nice.
I did a couple of those stories. And one, in fact, was a really great story about a woman who's 7 months pregnant and runs an ICU in downtown LA.
Mhm.
So I spent almost a day with her, following her in her life. And it's just really amazing to see. I mean, it was nerve-wracking to go into that environment, but then also the fact that she does that every single day while she's 7 months pregnant, I just sort of followed her protocols and figured if she's okay and she's trained in infectious disease, I'll just do exactly what she does.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it was really amazing to see how hard those people work, and
Mhm.
just, I mean, her day was insane. It was just one patient after another with COVID. So that was quite an intense experience.
Yeah, I bet. I mean,
And then, of course, the George Floyd protests.
oh my God. Yeah. And you covered a lot
Yeah,
of that, right?
yeah.
I want
I
to
mean,
show this one. I know we're going to be talking about sports, but you had this amazing, fantastic picture that I saw the other day, and you were kind enough to send me this paddle out that was done, right? You see that on the screen?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was incredible. But your work, I mean, we'll get into it, but your work is just so incredibly poignant and And most of the time it's very simple. I mean, it's very, you tell the story so eloquently without a lot going on, which is always been something I've admired about you, and that you see something, I think, in your head, and it translates to the camera better than most people I know.
Thank
So,
you, Andy. Yeah, I
yeah.
admire your work for sure. I have for many years. So
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's talk about where it all started, Lucy, because Legends of Sport, we like to talk about, where you are now and where your career you think it's going to go. But we also like to go back and see where the person started. Like what fueled the fire here? Because you grew up in the UK, right? As I know,
yeah.
here. Um, it's so interesting to me that both you and your sister are both in kind of the news business. She's more in the writing side, right?
Yeah.
And editing. How did that come about? I mean, were your parents in journalism, or I don't think I ever asked you this question. So
No, my parents weren't in journalism, but both my mother is actually from Poland. So during when we were growing up, it was still
Mhm.
during the Cold War. So we went every single year for a month to go and visit my relatives in Poland. And so we would drive across Europe, and we used to have foreign students staying in our house for my parents to make extra money,
Mhm.
and so we would go and visit these foreign students in different countries, and we basically stayed with these foreign students in all different countries in Europe, and then would go and visit my grandparents in Poland. And that was during the years of solidarity, and there was martial law one year, and so it was a fascinating experience for both of us, and we both asked tons of questions. And my mom a lot of the time she's just kind of wanted to give us this like, oh no, everything's fine. It would be like, I would see all these soldiers on the streets. So
Yeah.
we always had more questions than were answered. And I think that that's probably where both of us got, I mean, particularly driving through East and West Germany at that time, and you'd see Russian tanks, you'd
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
Soviet tanks, and you'd see US tanks. And there was obviously a lot more going on than so we both really have always been very interested in history,
Yeah.
and then the whole experience of what happened in Poland in the Second World War was obviously very, very fascinating. So it
Mhm.
was we both have just always been very interested in um, the
Yeah.
changes that we saw happening in front of our eyes, and
Yeah. So interesting. And I remember in your talk at the Annenberg Space for Photography, you said your first job was a writer, right? Your
yes,
first like official job was a writer.
yeah, I started off as a reporter in England.
Uh-huh.
And they had a very small photography department there, and it was also, I mean, I don't know if this is a constant in journalism everywhere at all times, but they always seem to be trying to make me do more stories by doing a lot of phone calls in the office. And
Mhm.
they had the photographer would go out and take photos, but there weren't enough photographers to go around for all the reporters. So at one point they gave me a camera and said, and I quickly realized that if I was taking photos, then I had to be out of the office, which was really my main goal when I was in my early 20s.
Right. Yeah.
so so it just came about like that. And then I just realized I went to exhibitions in England, and read a lot of books, and took an evening class in photography, and just started. I had my own darkroom at home, and I just
Mhm.
started really getting into the idea of photography, and I ended up liking visual language a lot more than I still like reading really well written journalism, but visual languages. So I found something that really just hit the spot for me. I think I really,
Yeah.
really enjoyed that a lot more.
How old were you when this sort of bug hit, the photography bug? How
I
old were
guess
you
I
that time?
was, yeah, in my early 20s. I mean, I've always,
Yeah, that's kind of late for somebody to like, dedicate their life to photography, that make that decision at that point, don't you think? Or
yeah,
maybe
I
not. I
guess
don't
so.
know.
But I was always into the idea of journalism, and obviously, with the Holocaust in Poland and bearing witness, and
Yeah.
I've always had that idea that journalism is a really important calling. And my mom she didn't study art, but she was always really into art. So
Mhm.
she would drag us to loads of museums when we were kids, and so it wasn't right, like I wasn't getting an education in looking at things visually. So the journalism was always there, and then the photography came along, and I was like, oh, I can do journalism in a visual way that is more meaningful to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden, according to the deep research that we did about you, my my great researcher and producer Veronica just was mining, as much as she could get.
Oh,
Uh,
great.
that's the great stuff. But all of a sudden, which I didn't know, you ended up in Mexico City. Like,
Yes,
what is the deal? How did that
what
happen?
is the deal?
Yeah.
Well, I was learning, for whatever reason. I have no idea why I did this, but I started taking evening classes in Spanish in England, and then I got a 3-month job that was for an organization called Rally, which was a youth development organization, and it was in Patagonia in southern Chile.
Mm.
Um, so I spent 3 months in southern Chile taking photos for this organization. It was just a short contract, and after I did that, I realized how much I just wanted to see another Spanish-speaking country in Latin America. I was just, I just got into the idea of being, and Mexico City was the largest city in Latin America, so I thought I'll go there. There's
Yeah.
probably work there. That's
Wow.
so.
And you were on
Yeah.
your own? You were by yourself? You just
Yes, I was by myself. Yeah, I went to Mexico City.
unbelievable. I mean, seriously, if I were your parents, I'd be like scared to death. But I mean, you're just schlepping around, another hemisphere, and with a camera. I don't know. I mean, I get worried when my kids go to the other side of LA, so I don't know. But
Yeah, no, I feel way
how
more like that
adventurous.
now.
Yeah, I mean, you're
No, just when
amazingly.
I was younger, I didn't feel that way. So
Yeah. So Lucy, tell me how the whole Reuters thing came about, because I think when I met you, were you working for AP then when you at the
yeah,
beginning? Or
probably. Yeah, when I
yeah,
first started, because I freelanced for about 10 years for AFP and AP, and
right.
then finally Reuters, and then it gradually became almost all my wire service or news
Mm-hmm.
freelance work was for Reuters, and then I
Right.
got hired with them. So yeah, so that was what I did when I first came to LA. I've been with Reuters now since 2003.
And Reuters is based in the UK, or where's Reuters based?
It's like AP. It has bases
Yeah.
everywhere. And I mean, there's a base in New York.
Yeah.
Originally, it was based in London, but
Mhm.
at this point, we have bureaus everywhere.
Mm. Well, that's where our worlds merged, because
Yes.
I mean, I can't even count how many games you and I sat literally next to each other, and
Yes.
at Staples Center, NBA Finals, All-Star games, whatever it was, there was Lucy.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting world that we travel in sports photography. Needless to say, it's been male dominated for so long, right? And thankfully not as much as it has been. And I'm going to name off some names of women photographers that I admire, and that are colleagues of yours as well. I mean, yourself, Elsa Garrison, Maddie
Yes.
Meyer, Lori Shepler, Jen Podheiser, Susan Regan, going way back, Ann Ryan. I mean, I literally shot an NBA Finals next to Ann Ryan, and she was 9 months pregnant with
Oh
twins.
wow.
Yeah, it
Oh
was,
wow.
and there she's working as hard as the rest of us. And I go back to a quote, I think in the Who Shot Sports book, which you and I were both part of that exhibition, and it was
Yeah.
curated by the great Gail Buckland. And Gail said on the page where she featured you, she said that you had said that male sports editors were under the opinion that women just weren't strong enough to be carrying equipment around, which is like the most chauvinist thing ever. But was was that I mean, I know how hard it is to become, a top flight sports photographer, and I'm a man. I can't even imagine what it was like as a woman. And not like, the heaviest woman out there, you're kind of small. Did you run into that kind of roadblock time after time, or you just overcame it?
It's got progressively better over time, and each
Mhm.
generation, I mean, I remember when I was first starting, there was Amy Sansetta from AP, and she really started off in the era when it was very challenging, and
Yeah.
you know, it's definitely, it's better now. And when I started, and thankfully things change with the generations, and they change with, I mean, people like you. I mean, when I first started out, you offered me so much help in teaching me how to put remotes, and it just
Be careful what you wish for. Yeah. Yeah.
no, I mean, that was really my start in sports photography, and I got to travel so much because when I first started doing basketball, I mean, part of the challenging thing is, if it's very competitive. We work in wire services, and it's extremely competitive
Yeah.
between each other. And when you first start off, and if you start doing well, or and people don't like the competition, and if you're the only woman, then that manifests in lots of different ways, which are not great. But
Hmm.
one of the ways that I found to keep myself sane, and just, you know, just sort of find a way around all of that, was when I first started doing MBA. Instead of just competing with somebody and doing the same one remote that they were doing, I was like, well, I won't do it in a wire service way. I'll copy what Andy does, because Andy puts 6 remotes, and I'll just take it to the extreme and do something like that, where and so I
Well,
started
hold on.
doing that, and you
Let,
started helping me, and that, you know, then they started sending me to all these different places. So it
well,
really was.
let's back up for a second. You're being like incredibly humble. You know, I have like 3 people who work with me every game. You know, minimum 1, 2, sometimes 3. You know, you're doing this by yourself. You're schlepping all this equipment in and out. You know, I have the luxury of working most of my time in Staples Center, so I get to keep my gear there. You know, we just take it from the closet to the court and back. I mean, you're a one-woman show, and not only all of that, but then you have to transmit your photos, you have to edit them, transmit them. I mean, it's an amazing workload. I was always in awe of how hard you worked, and you
Thank
continue to
you.
work, obviously, but
Yeah, yeah, no, it's changed a lot. There's a lot.
yeah,
I do less schlepping than I used to. There was a lot of schlepping in the early days.
schlepping, yes. Right now, I'm not doing any schlepping. The only schlepping I do is getting on Zoom, but um, so Lucy, you shot all these NBA games that we shot together, and I just want to show a few pictures. I mean, you know, some of your work, I mean, all of your work is amazing, but and our worlds collided many, many times. And then, of course, you know, you had your Olympic experience, so your NBA sort of background, you know, helped you with the Olympics.
This was amazing. This
Yeah,
was, yeah. I photographed. I think in 2004, the U.S. team didn't field its best players,
right, right.
and this was 2000. This was Beijing. Yeah, it was
Yeah, this is Beijing.
and
Yes,
they were trying to recreate the dream team,
right.
and it was just so amazing. I mean, the US basketball players are just so dominant compared to any other players in the world,
Yep.
and for the longest time they didn't play as a team, they played as individual players. And
Hmm.
my crew, I can never say his name, I should, because I'm of Polish descent, but Krzyzewski
Yeah.
put together this team, and they those 4 guys who you wouldn't expect to be
Hmm.
playing as teammates really got it together for this. And it was so beautiful to watch them playing together like that. And it was, that shot is not actually a very great shot, but it was so challenging
Oh, I love that
in
shot.
the chaos of afterwards, to get the 4 of them. I was
Yeah.
literally watching one out of the corner of one eye, one out of the corner of the other eye, and I was like, they've got to get together as a 4 at one moment. And that
Well,
was it.
amazing. How many Olympics have you covered, winter and summer? I mean, this shot is just ridiculous.
Oh, that was a
To
Summer
know how you took
Olympics
that picture.
from
I,
the roof.
that's unbelievable. Wow.
With
But
a remote camera. I wasn't in the roof. Um, I have shot 7 Olympic. I would just
7.
7 Olympics. I would, as we speak, or no, in July I was heading to Tokyo, but
Hmm.
like every other event on our sporting calendar,
Yeah.
um, that has been crossed off my calendar.
Yeah. I mean, well, you're just putting it off till next summer, right?
I think that's
Yeah.
what's going to happen. We'll see.
Do you have a preference for winter or summer? I mean, I know, of course, the weather, but do you prefer winter sports to summer sports, or doesn't really matter?
I like the Summer Olympics better. It's a
Yeah.
lot harder work because there are a lot more sports in the Summer Olympics, and it's a
Yeah.
much bigger team that Reuters sends.
Hmm.
And so it's working much longer hours.
Yeah.
And I usually do track and field or athletics at the Summer Olympics, and that's
Mhm.
long days.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a morning and an evening.
Do you have
But I think,
any horror stories? Any, I mean, because I've been to a few Olympics, and it's just gotten so difficult to work. I mean, to do what
yeah,
we do, and they're so restrictive. I mean, I remember in where was I? I think it was probably Barcelona in '92. They wouldn't even
yeah,
allow me to walk from one side of the court to the other. It's just like,
yes,
okay, I mean, stuff that we do all the time,
yes.
and you know, and I'm sure you're very good at politely coercing the security or whatever you got to do your job, right?
It depends on the country. Some countries
Yeah.
you can get away with a lot of that stuff, and others not.
Well, speaking of that, talk about this picture, which is absolutely mind blowing. This picture to me. I mean, I've seen it before. Can you talk about, and a lot of people who listen to Legends of Sport are not photographers, but they're interested in photography or they're interested in sports or how we do it, like in a nutshell, talk about how this picture was made, because it's not a person standing on the sideline with a camera who happens to snap this picture, right?
Yes, well, this is basically what you taught me in basketball applied to athletics at the Olympics.
Mhm.
And at the Olympics, there are a few of us who are given this very, it's an amazing position at the finish line,
Yeah.
which faces the athletes head on as they run across the finish line. And it's a challenging position to shoot because the athletes run so, I mean, Usain Bolt is like watching a motorbike go past you.
Yeah.
He's so fast.
Right.
So and when you see all the athletes coming towards you,
Hmm.
obviously you can guess that if Usain Bolt's in the race, he's going to be a story whether he wins or loses.
Hmm.
But it's also very difficult to see who's winning at that angle, because the depth of you can't really see if somebody's a few inches ahead of the other person.
It's less
So
than 10 seconds, the race, right?
the race is less than 10 seconds. So that's the other thing. There's so much build up to it. And in some of these stadiums at the Olympics, there's 60, 80,000 people in the stadium. So there's this, it's incredibly noisy.
Hmm.
And then as the athletes stand on the starting blocks, it just goes completely silent, and they take the longest time to start that race. So you're there, and your heart is beating because you're like,
Yeah.
I hope I don't mess this up. So I set a lot of remotes on the finish line,
Hmm.
and because there are lots and lots of photographers in the stadium, you have to use hardwire. You can't use radio transmitters because everybody would be using the same radio signal at the exact same
Hmm.
moment. So I put wire between the cameras, and I set about 7 remote cameras on the one finish line, and
God.
most of them are using a 300 millimeter lens, and
Uh-huh.
I'll focus on the person I think is going to win, and then I'll compose 2 or 3 different shots of them with, in this case, Wallace Spearman was, because the US is always a story in the 100
Yeah.
meters. So Usain Bolt versus the US is a good story.
Hmm.
And then I'll do some wider angle lenses. I'll do one with a shot clock and a wide one of the stadium. So
Uh-huh.
it's basically just telling different elements of the story by using different lenses and focusing on different potential storylines.
And are
Um,
you shooting with a handheld camera too, or are you just firing remote?
Yes, I have
Yeah.
3 handheld, bizarrely, 3. I have 2. One is a 400 or 200 to 400
Hmm.
millimeter lens, and
Hmm.
then I have a 70 to 200, because often the athletes run directly towards us and they go around the corner, slightly passing by.
Yeah.
But often they'll come back and they're very close. And Usain Bolt used to always get down on his knees and do the lightning bolt thing. And
Unbelievable. And
yes,
and so let me just ask you a technical question. How are you firing your remotes? A foot pedal or something?
yes, I have a foot pedal, which is incredibly hard for me because I can't coordinate 2 things at the same time. I like having hand buttons on my cameras.
That picture just, I mean, and the focus on it, it's absolutely tack sharp focus. And
Yeah, and you want to have not too you want to have quite a wide aperture so that you
yeah,
get that nice blurring of the background too. So you always set somebody standing there with a card on the finish line or slightly after the finish line. And
unbelievable. So when you come back with a picture like that, you get excited. Do you like, oh shit, that was damn, I did it. I mean, all the work that went into it, right?
yeah,
And I'm sure you got, various angles and really, really cool stuff. And I've seen your, more wide shots and all that. But I mean, there's something really amazing about that picture. Do like in the old days, we would hold up the film and say, "Damn, that was good." Do
Yeah.
you take a
No,
little
and
bit of credit and feel good about it, or are you
yeah,
just
for
doing your job?
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
No, for sure, because also with those, it's very incremental. And when I use lots of different cameras, and I look at the other cameras and from different angles, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't look nearly as good. And I mean, as we know, that's one of the beautiful things about photography. If you watch the video of that,
Mm-hmm.
the moment where he puts his, he's
Yeah.
shushing the competition because he's so much better than the rest of the field, you wouldn't notice that on video. It would happen like this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the fact that we're able to freeze that second and make the race about that 1 second, which really tells you the entire story of the race. It wasn't that Usain
Yeah.
Bolt won, it was that he's the greatest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he knows he's the greatest, and he
Yeah.
wants to let his competitors know too. So
What a picture!
yes,
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I like the feeling of that.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up about that particular picture. I mean, let's say that race happened. I don't know what, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock. What time were you at the stadium setting up your stuff?
Oh,
And, yeah,
it's, I mean,
9 in the morning, something like that.
maybe not that early, but it's at least 4 or 5 hours. I mean, with an event like that over many days, often you'll leave some, depending on the country and how likely the camera equipment is to be stolen. Sometimes you leave some stuff,
Right.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, otherwise every single day, yes, you're setting up the. So no, in that case, we were shooting the morning session too. So
Mm,
probably yes, got there at 9 in the morning, and that was in the evening that was
unbelievable.
happening.
You were in Rio too, right, Lucy?
Yes, I
And
was in.
yeah, I have that. Well, I don't have it on here, but you had that great picture from the roof, right? Um, from
Oh,
the roof of
with
the
the fireworks.
stadium. Was that from Rio? It was like
That
the
was
overall.
no, that was in Beijing.
Oh, okay, that was cool because the reason I bring up Rio is because we have friends who did exactly what you said. They left cameras even chained up with padlocks on the roof of
Yeah,
the Rio Stadium, and they were stolen, right?
yeah. I think
So,
they said about a third of journalists at that Olympics had their gear stolen. It
yeah,
was
scary.
not a good one for that.
I
It
mean,
was it was wonderful in many other ways, and dealing. You were talking about being able to talk your way into places.
yeah,
I mean, having to talk your way into places or explain to people that you need to do something. I mean, Brazilians are just so lovely. You're just like, no, yeah, whatever you like to do. So that part of it
right.
was wonderful, but
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it was a bit challenging keeping hold of your gear at that one.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories, but the work was amazing out of Rio. So, um, Lucy, you have a great quote about on photography, and I have to read it. I guess you did an interview for World Photo, and you said, "I have more patience than I used to have. I I like to try to take the time now to figure out what the story is instead of going in with preconceived ideas. It's a privilege to be invited in as an intimate observer of other people's lives. Meeting so many different people is one of the best aspects of the job. This profession puts you in countries and situations you probably wouldn't experience otherwise. I feel fortunate to work for Reuters doing a job I love." So is that like how you feel every day? No
Of course
matter
not.
no matter how how
We're in
tough
the
the
middle of
day,
a pandemic.
right? And you're in the hazmat suit shooting the
Yeah,
coronavirus.
it
Yeah.
is what it is.
But look at what you're able to bring, your perspective and your empathy comes through your photos, what you're able to bring to the world as a photographer, as a journalist. Very few people have that I guess, opportunity to do. And does that cross your mind that that what you're doing is really important for people to understand? You're not just doing your job, you're not just creating beautiful pictures, but you're helping the world to understand what is going on, and it be it a pandemic, be it an Olympics, whatever, right? So it's
Yeah.
storytelling at its highest level, I think.
Yeah, I do think it's important, and I think it's changed over the years, and it's really important to listen and to pay attention to what
Hmm.
photographers in different countries are doing, and producing work, non-professional photographers as well, and we can all learn from each other, and I mean, I was with the pandemic in particular. It was I mean, that's a good example because it's been very challenging in the US to get access to hospitals, and so there were a lot of photos of the shutdown, of protests, people protesting the shutdown, and it.
Mhm.
I tried for the longest time to get access to an ICU because I really felt that. I mean, that sums up what's happening in the US right now. That not the whole story, obviously, because there's this other story now going on with racial inequality,
Right.
which has always been there. But as far as just the pandemic, was the how hard these healthcare workers were working, and you'd go out on the street, and so many people were oblivious to that fact. So just to convey to everybody that yeah, this is a global pandemic and these people are working, a lot of the nurses are working 24-hour shifts, and
Mhm.
so to be able to see that truth and to share it with people, I think is very important. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk a little bit about how the intersection of news photography and sports kind of came together with this picture. Not as much news, but can you talk about this photo and the assignment and what this picture means to you? Because this is the photo that's featured in the book, Who Shot Sports, as you know, and the exhibition that we were both a part of. And Gail picked this picture for a very specific reason. So, what's your perspective on this?
Well, when Gail picked this picture, it was an exhibition about the history of sports, and I like this picture, but I was also surprised because obviously we've covered a lot of professional sports, we've
Mm.
covered a lot of big sporting events, and I realized why she had picked it, and I realized how sports is not just a professional thing. Sport is what it provides to people's lives, and this woman is a was it was in 2011, but she's a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor who has Alzheimer's,
Mm.
and this was a Russian guy in LA who'd set up this program of table tennis or ping pong for Alzheimer's or people with dementia. And there were a lot of old people in this program. And he didn't offer the program in order to cure Alzheimer's or to even, arrest the development of the disease, but it was purely because he realized that when people got involved in playing sport, it helped their depression, it
Hmm.
helped their balance, it increased blood flow. He had lots of reasons, but when I was watching Betty and a lot of other people at this center playing ping pong, it was really amazing to watch them because they got so engrossed in the game and they got so competitive, and it was just they lost themselves.
Yeah.
And they forgot the rest of their situation and the confusion, and they weren't confused at all. They were so engrossed in the game. So
Yeah.
I think this photo is beautiful for that reason. I just remember what sport did for the people who were playing table tennis, and
Mhm.
what sport's always done for me. I love playing sport, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah. I mean, look at the expression on her face. It's like a peaceful expression, but yet she's concentrated on what she's doing,
she
and
was really good as well. It was
yeah.
so fun to watch her. She was
Yeah.
great.
So many pictures that Gail picked. I wish Gail was here with us. Maybe one day we'll do a panel with Gail together, but because I've done them with her and she's amazing. I'd love to get into her head as to why she picks certain pictures as a curator.
Yes.
And I was surprised too in the one she picked in mine, the one of Kobe in the ice bucket.
Yes.
And the exhibition was a groundbreaking exhibition. It was the first time there was such a large group of photographers represented who were sports photographers. Really, the first major exhibition that was in the museum that started in the Brooklyn Museum, as you know.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot to thank Gail for with that.
Yeah.
And hopefully down the road, we'll all get together at one point. Um, so, Lucy, your job at Reuters now has transitioned to multimedia. I mean, that's gone on for a few years already. So, how was that transition for you, or learning the video aspect of doing what you do?
I enjoy doing video too. It's a different thing, and sometimes some stories work better for video, and some work better for photos. So
Mhm.
obviously, it's challenging to do both at the same time, but it is possible. Often one suffers if
Yeah.
you're you're trying to do both. But in the ICU, I mean, particularly with the pandemic, because we're trying not to send out too many people because if one person can do everything, so then it minimizes the risk for my colleagues. So
Mhm.
in the ICU, I was interviewing for the text reporter. I was shooting video for the video department, and I was shooting photos for the photo department. So
Yeah, yeah. But
it's
video is its own animal. I mean, you have to know how to shoot video. It's not just like shooting a still picture, but moving the camera. So
yeah.
you just sort of self-taught yourself, or you watched a lot of documentary type photography or videography and learned it, or just learned by osmosis? How did it all work?
It's been a lot of courses over the years. I don't want to get too sidetracked on this because
Yeah,
it becomes too long a story. But
yeah,
one of the experiences I had in between um, being in Mexico City and being in Los Angeles was I ended up working as an extra on the movie Titanic. And so I spent 6 months sitting on a film set talking to people who were working on the film set, watching the cinematographer. So that experience, when I first came to LA, I got a subscription to American Cinematographer magazine, and I read all these books on cinematography. And I, when I was growing up in England, there weren't that many cinemas either, or there were, but it wasn't something we did in the same way that American kids did. So when I first came to LA, I was so excited to go to the Egyptian Theater and that movie theater on Beverly Boulevard that I think Quentin Tarantino owns now.
yeah,
And I
right.
saw all the classics of 70s cinema and Taxi Driver and the Godfather series and all of those on the big screen.
Yeah.
So I sort of had my own little film education when I first came to LA. And then Reuters also sent me on, there was a amazing Brian Storm multimedia course that I went on that really taught me a lot about video editing as well. And I've
Wow.
done a couple of courses learning how to edit in Final Cut and Premiere and all of those things. So
So you're on the set of Titanic. I'm just trying to picture this. You're on the
that's the
set of
whole
Titanic.
sidetrack that I'll have to tell you
No,
over a beer one
no,
day. But
but
that's a whole
but
other
but
whole other story.
we have a very similar thread here, okay? Because and I've never talked about this really publicly, especially on my own podcast. But I was an extra on the movie Grease, which my sister happened to be in the movie, right? And this is the summer of 1977,
Oh
and I
wow.
I came out to visit her. It was in between let's see, yeah, my sophomore and junior year of college, right? So I
Uh-huh.
came out to visit my sister, and she's doing Grease every day, so I just tagged along with her. I was 19, right?
Yes.
So I would just be hanging out it was very loose, I'd hang out on the set. I would be hang out in her dressing room, whatever it was, until maybe after about a week and a half, one of the casting directors came up and said, "Are you in the movie?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, you're the right age and everything. You want to be in the movie?" I said, "Sure." So they casted me as an extra for 2 weeks. It was the
Oh,
greatest
that's
thing ever.
awesome.
The carnival scene and the dance scene. So I know
Uh-huh.
I'm getting totally sidetracked. But anyway, long story short, I became friends with the unit photographer, one of the most famous unit photographers ever in the history of Hollywood, Alan Pape. I mean,
Oh wow.
done,
Yeah.
did every great movie that Paramount ever did, and so many others. Anyway, and I was bringing a camera because I had gotten into it in college, and I started showing him pictures, and he said, "You know what, kid, you have kind of an eye. There's this school called Art Center up on the hill in Pasadena. Maybe they have a night class you can take." And he told my sister, and she got me enrolled. Next thing I know, I'm applying to Art Center, and it changed my life, and I moved to California. So
Wow. I didn't know that story. That's amazing,
isn't
actually.
that crazy? I mean, you're
Yeah.
like on the set of Titanic watching James Cameron and all his amazing cinematographers and special effects and all that. The same thing happened to me. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Good thing we had this podcast to talk. All the years we've known each other, we never shared that. Unbelievable. Well, Luce, I got to thank you so much, and we can't leave this conversation without talking about Kobe Bryant, who
Yeah.
both of us had the absolute, and I can't say it in any other way, the privilege of covering his
Yeah.
career. And
Yeah.
because he was just a different kind of dude and an
Yes.
amazing, amazing, amazing athlete. And you sent me a few pictures of Kobe. I'm going to show this one, which I absolutely love. I love this one. And this one's gotten a lot of play actually lately because of the Last Dance and that whole episode devoted to Kobe and stuff. And somebody actually on social media, I don't know if you know this, like actually said, "Well, he's disrespecting Michael." I, it couldn't be further from the truth, right? You
Well,
reviewed
yeah, I
them?
mean that was actually the only reason. That was one of those games where
Yeah.
this was the only game I ever saw where Kobe was playing against Michael, and they fell over, and some, I'm not
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
something happened, and
Right.
he
There was a
was
tumble
helping
or
him up.
something. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was a real jokey thing, and it wasn't at all disrespect. It was
No,
it
you and I literally were next to each other because I have this similar, I don't have this moment, which I wish I did, but I had something a little wider because it was down court, as I remember, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
then you sent me this one too, which is a great, this overhead shot, this one, which is fantastic. This is an angle that we loved. We can no longer do at Staples Center, unfortunately. I don't know if you do that, but no more
No, oh,
overheads.
that's
Yeah.
horrible. Yeah,
But the Mamba would give us I said if he didn't give us 4 or 5 dunks a game, at least in his early career, it was, you know, a bad game for us. But
yeah.
um, it's such a special picture because, you know, he's all alone there. It's such a graphic, incredibly, you know, the action, you just stopped it. It's incredible. I love this picture. Very, very difficult to get this picture of him, of the athlete looking up and dunking at the same time, which doesn't really happen that often.
Well, and no one else in the frame. Like this
Yeah.
must have been a breakaway,
Right. Right.
which
Yeah.
Kobe did many times, obviously.
Yeah, crazy. Well, what do you have any special memories of shooting Kobe specifically? I want to preface that by saying we're going to be doing a series leading up to his Hall of Fame enshrinement, which now got postponed till next year, but
Wow, yeah.
gives me more time to put it together. But I'm talking to a lot of guests and a lot of people who aren't guests about a special Kobe memory or moment. So, do you have something you can share?
Well, I mean, the just as a general memory, it was the idea that when I first started photographing Kobe, I didn't realize how great he was,
Mm,
because he was at, that was in the early years, and he was just so amazingly athletic.
yeah.
And it was almost more interesting to watch him as his career went on, and he lost that amazing athleticism, but he never lost his absolute desire to win. And I've never seen another player, never seen anybody in any other sport who was so utterly competitive. And I'm very competitive, so I would watch him and think, I see where this guy, he's just so insanely competitive, and
Yeah.
that was beautiful to watch. um, that photo I sent you of him and Shaq was
Oh,
that
you
was
know what?
really,
I didn't save that. I mean, I have it, and we'll put it
yeah,
in. But yeah, I know that one you're talking about, which
yeah. So
Sports
there's
Illustrated put on the cover saying it's over or something. Yeah.
yeah, that was a really amazing photo, because that was that year. It was 2003, and it
Mhm.
was when the Lakers had signed Gary Payton and Karl Malone, and Shaq and Kobe were on the team as
Right.
well.
Right.
And it was expected to be this really amazing team of four players.
Hmm.
And so I think we all did. I shot the preseason, and I'm sure you did too. And it was the idea of trying to get all four of them in one frame,
Yeah.
super super challenging. And
Yes.
then I realized that even just getting Kobe and Shaq in one frame was super super challenging, because they never went anywhere near each other. So I remember,
Yeah.
like, the season started in October, and I remember just watching Kobe every single game, because it
Yeah.
was actually rare for me to photograph every single game of the season, but because it was that amazing team, I was photographing every single game. So
Hmm.
I'd watch Kobe every game and wait for him to walk near Shaq, and he never did.
Right.
And so I literally would not take my camera off him for the entire game.
Hmm.
And I finally got that photograph of him walking, sort of bumping into Shaq.
Yeah. This is the
And
picture right here.
yeah, I finally got that picture in April. Like,
Oh,
it took that many months for me to get a photograph of the two of them in the same frame.
yeah. Yeah.
And that really ended up telling the story of that whole relationship between the two of them, which,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, it's sad because this doesn't, to me, sum up their relationship. It just sums up the
no,
end
because
of
it
their
changed.
relationship. And
Yeah,
so many people point to the end of their relationship and see it as like all encompassing of the entire breadth of time that they played together, which is completely false.
yes.
And me being there, myself being there, more on the inside, I think, and seeing what warriors these guys were and teammates and brothers, it's a shame really that so many people point to the end as really the summation of their relationship.
Yeah,
But this but doesn't negate the fact that you busted your hump to get this picture. And you got it, which is amazing.
Well, yeah, no, the relationship changed very much over the years after that, and
Yeah,
also, that shot of Kobe with LeBron and Carmelo and
yeah,
Dwayne Wade. I
yeah,
mean, it was lovely to see all those players play together, and when
yeah.
they stopped competing against each other and played as a team, they were just completely, nobody in the world could beat them.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of that, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Women's World Cup. This photo is from there, right? It's from the World Cup, or is
Yeah.
this from the Olympics? This is a World
No,
Cup.
this was the Women's World Cup. Yeah.
Yeah. So what team was this? The Netherlands or
This
Germany?
was the Netherlands. Yeah.
Netherlands, which had that surprising run
Yeah.
up into the end. They were incredible. What was it like covering that? Because it was such a historical, especially in the U.S. with what the U.S. national team was really going for, and you know, of course, Megan Rapinoe, was the absolute spokesperson for everything that the U.S. women's team was going for in terms of equal pay and all the respect that they deserved, which they're still fighting for, of course. How was that event to cover as one of the ones that you've covered over the years?
Well, I found this particular Women's World Cup really amazing because obviously I've covered a lot of sporting events, and you turn up at a sporting event and you can tell by the crowd size and the passion of the crowd, how popular the sport is.
Yeah,
And women's sport obviously has been historically very neglected compared to men's sport. And I think the figures, I saw one study which was talking about ESPN coverage of women's sports, and it was something like 2% of the sports shown on ESPN was women's sports.
mm,
And then, that obviously has a knock-on effect, because with this Women's World Cup, they were estimating the amount of TV advertising it would get.
yeah,
And by the end of the tournament, there was double that much. They underestimated by a half, because it was
yeah,
just such an amazing tournament. And I grew up in England, which is a completely soccer crazy country, and so it was really amazing to see the historic soccer countries, England, Argentina, France,
mhm,
the Netherlands,
yeah,
and to see the women playing for those teams. And they were just so insanely competitive. And it was just the quality of the game was so much better than the American team has always been good, but to
mhm,
see teams from around the world playing at that level too, it really seemed like a turning point.
yeah,
And
for
also,
sure.
I mean, when I was growing up in England, it was, there was the era of football hooliganism, and it was mainly, I mean, I never went to a football match when I was a kid, because it was something that men did. It
Yeah,
wasn't something,
it was so
you wouldn't take
dangerous,
your daughter to a football game.
right?
So to see,
I'll
to be
grow
in
you up pretty
Paris,
fast, yeah, for sure.
yeah, yes,
Yeah,
to be in Paris and to see like all these men with sons at the game,
yeah.
it was, I was like, oh, I've lived through a generational change. That's really amazing to watch. And
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I told you this, but my wife and Mimi and I were in London last September, um,
yeah,
and we literally stayed around the corner from the Chelsea Stadium.
oh
And the
wow, yeah,
second night we were there, they had a match.
uh,
Oh my God! I mean, I've been to like how many, gigantic events, Super Bowls, World Series, NBA Finals. I had never seen a crowd, and this is a regular season game. This
yes,
wasn't like for any cup or anything. It was crazy. But
yes,
everybody was having fun, which I thought was amazing. And I love to see, and this is one of the kind of hallmarks of our Legends of Sport platform. I just love to see the generations, the
yeah,
grandpa and the dad and the kid,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's just amazing.
yeah.
So Lucy, what's next for you? This is the last thing I want to ask you. I mean, 2019, you're part of a Pulitzer Prize winning organization for your coverage of migration.
Mhm.
Unbelievable piece that you guys produced. I mean, that's the pinnacle of our careers, right? I mean, when I got my first Sports Illustrated cover, I thought, that was the pinnacle. Didn't know I'd be around this long. I mean, you win a Pulitzer Prize, and that's the Academy Award of photojournalism, right? What's next for you? What's on the bucket list? What have you not covered that you still want to do?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, I love covering the Olympics. That's really
Mhm.
my favorite thing to cover of anything. So I'm definitely looking for. I was going to go to Tokyo before the Olympics and do all these other stories around. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, Andy. I can't think of one event that I would like to cover that I haven't covered.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
I should
Well,
have thought about that one.
well,
um,
I'm sure there's a lot more. I mean, your career is has got a long way to go. So I can't wait to see what else you're going to produce. I hope that our worlds cross again in sports
yes,
somehow.
yes.
I know you're not finding yourself inside a lot these days, shooting inside assignments, which is where I got to hang out. But I always loved shooting next to you, Lucy, and we became
You
really, really
too.
good friends. And it's just wonderful to get to know you and Brian. We went to your wedding.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
fantastic. It's so great to see you,
It's great to
and
see you.
keep up the great work. I mean, you know, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but you're such an inspiration. And I don't want to say just to young women photographers, but you are, you know, and I can talk to my daughter Mimi, who's now going to be 12, believe it or not. You met her when she was an
Yes.
infant, um, who's starting to get into photography, and I'm
Oh,
showing her your work, and she knows other people's work, but it's important that you keep that torch, that you carry that torch and move it forward, and you're doing that. So keep it going, Lucy.
you too. Thank you very
Yeah,
much, Andy. It's
so
been
great to see
awesome.
you.
Awesome to see you.
Yeah, and we will share these photos, and we'll link to your Instagram and all that stuff, and I'll do that on the outro. And I hope we get to see you soon. Please send my love to Brian, and
Yeah.
stay well and be
And
careful
you
out
and
there,
to
will you?
Situ. Yeah.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Huge thanks to my friend Lucy Nicholson for being an incredible guest today. So humble, multimedia. She can cover anything you put in front of her. Wow, incredible. Pulitzer Prize winner. Let's not forget that. She's so humble about that. Just kind of, Pulitzer Prize, blow that off. But that's the Academy Award. That's the pinnacle in my business. And for her to achieve that with her Reuters team, man, it doesn't get better than that. But she's hungry for more, and she's going to be out there shooting more and more. A lot of news these days, of course, but hopefully our paths will cross on some field, some court, someplace where she and I can get back to the way things were when she used to sit next to me all those years at Laker games. So keep doing what you do, Lucy, and just keep being the wonderful person that you are. And thank you for sharing your life story and your journey with us. Everybody, keep following us. Our social media, of course, Instagram at Legends of Sport, our Twitter at Legends_of Sport, and our blog, legendsofsport.blog. My photography, as always, at ADB Photo Inc. Thanks to my great producer and researcher, Veronica Ahn, and big thanks to our partners over at Think Tank, who once again have sponsored an episode of the Legendary Photographer Series. So stay tuned to our Instagram and to our Twitter feed, and we will let you know how to qualify for a free backpack as a giveaway from Think Tank. So thank you to our friends at Think Tank, and we will see you with another legendary photographer very soon. Take care, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you down the road.